years of HR expertise in gas, oil and gas, aviation, technology, healthcare sector. She has been handling all the companies across in UAE. She has her own consultancy called as SNK Consulting. She has been a freelancer for the past 5 years. And now she has been joined in SNK Consulting by her sister, Dsouza, who is also a passionate HR leader with over 15 years of experience in HR, international experience in HR, in aviation and healthcare. So the both of them together can give us a lot of insights on how it is in the UAE, what is it that job seekers can look forward to. So I will not take much time because I really want to give them the space to discuss about jobs, candidates. So I will first like to invite, I would also like to invite ELRONA and DESMA right now to, first of all, give us a little brief about how did SNK Consulting come into the picture and the interesting topic of today. Not to be a candidate, to be a candidate and not to be a job seeker. What do you mean exactly by that? So over to you, ELRONA and SILBA, any one of you can take. And I would like to also take this time to welcome the YouTube audience as we are live on YouTube right now.
Thank you so much, Anita, for that wonderful introduction. I always like giggle when I hear people talking about us, because we know our story, but hearing someone else say it always brings a big smile to my face. So thank you so much for those generous words of praise.
It's like I'm watching my journey up until today, thanks to your narration of how my 20 years of experience has been.
Yeah, absolutely. So SNK actually started about 5 years ago, and it was started by ELRONA. She was freelancing after spending around 15 years in the corporate world, and then decided to embark on an entrepreneurial journey and started SNK Consulting. I was a bit of a late bloomer from that perspective, so I will continue to work in the corporate world, and my last role was the head of HR for a hospital in Dubai, which was King's College Hospital London. So I set up the hospital and a couple of clinics. And then I was obviously inspired by her journey. And then, she provided almost a platform for me to join her. So she did all of the legwork as a good older sister and provided a platform. And then I very conveniently joined her earlier this year in January 2020. And then it has been the two of us, and we have now a team of around 10 consultants that work with us across all of our clients. So it's been an interesting, amazing journey ourselves. We've learned so much despite having, a number of years under our belt. It's been fantastic, and it's literally been no looking back. And we're very excited to share all of our learnings in terms of candidates being candidates and not job seekers. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So if you could just throw a light about why do you feel, what is the difference between a candidate and a job seeker to start off with?
So for me, we've done recruitment. It's part of what we do. And together between us, we've, talked about this for a while, and we understood that there are two types of people, that are two personas of people that are looking for jobs. So we kind of coined this job seeker versus candidate. Effectively, if you take dictionary translations, they're the same in some ways, but there are different behaviors that we've kind of put together. So as a job seeker, you are basically out of a job, or you are looking for your next job. So you're not as we call, not somebody who's employed and looking for a job. This is somebody who's out of a job and now is looking for the next opportunity, whatever the circumstances of how that person landed in this situation, right? So that makes you a job seeker. Now, it's tough times out there. There are lots of job seekers in Dubai and globally, because this situation has hit everyone, and unemployment rates across the world have kind of hit scary numbers. So what we thought is we would share our knowledge of how to come out of the mold of being just another job seeker who's out of a job, applying left, right, and center for roles in every way and any way possible, and differentiate yourself and kind of stand out to say, look, I'm just as good as a person to look to get the job as somebody who's already employed and as a candidate. So you rise from a job seeker status to a candidate that has something to offer to the next organization. So job seeker is like a little reactive to the circumstances that you're in, and candidate is being more proactive and looking forward and future oriented. So this is how we have differentiated job seeker and a candidate. And all we try and do is through these talks is to kind of help job seekers step away from being a job seeker and enter the world of being a candidate.
Thanks. And if I can add to that, Anita, so a job seeker, from our experience, basically applies for any job. A candidate owns their employability. So how the behavior between a job seeker and candidate is very different, we have seen. So, when a job is posted, for instance, you have, as recruiters, we receive hundreds of applications, of which very easily a few applicants stand out straight away. Why do they stand out? Number one, because how they address the application, i.e., whether they send an email, you can see that the email, they put thought into it, they understand the requirements of the role, they explain why their sort of background matches the requirements of the role. And then, so they customize their application for that specific role, as opposed to the hundreds of other CVs that says, please pick me, or, having reviewed all of the requirements for this role, I think I match it perfectly. And they don't. So clearly they've not read the requirement, right? So they automatically eliminate themselves from the process. Versus a candidate who has put thought and effort into submitting an application. Looking for a job is a full-time job. So you have to make that effort to customize your application for every single role.
If I were to give an analogy, it's like you are bidding for a job and you're putting a proposal together. So the proposal part feels like unpaid work, but you're working towards getting a paid work. So you have to put in the effort to win that work, right? The same applies to your job, is you have to put in the effort to get the result. It's not, there are hundreds of job seekers out there and you're just as different. So you're not any different from that perspective, So how do you differentiate it? Same as you would do when you're trying to win a sale, is to say, what are you? What do you offer that is different? And that's what you do when the way you apply, the way you select your roles, the way you understand the organization that you're applying to, the little more deeper dive that you take will stand out, and there is no real, don't restrict yourself to just one or two ways of applying. I know, LinkedIn and all other job portals are at your fingertips, so it's easy to do the easy apply, but take the time to understand what roles are out there and start applying, in a more proactive manner, and kind of take your fit, because you're committing the next few years of your life to this next job. So make sure that it counts. I understand people have, current situations, but that very soon kind of fizzles away. And then you are in a job 48 hours, 50 hours a week, working with a company that you're not, happy with. You are working with some team workers that you didn't really, fully appreciate it. Then you will lead yourselves to other situations, stress, anxiety, depression, all of that becomes, part of your life, and you should try and avoid that. So short term versus long term, think long term is what a candidate really does.
That's really beautifully put, because I agree, these are unprecedented times and we see so many people who are out of job right now. It's not because they lack skills or abilities. It's just the situation as it is. And the competition is really high. So I think as a candidate, you have to be always prepared. So from the job seeker to the candidate, that journey is so important. So thank you
Right.
so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
So if as a consultant, I mean, you all have gone through a lot of CVs. I'm sure a lot of people send CVs to you. What do you think are the pitfalls of the job search? What is the mistakes, common mistakes that you spot? You know, you get a lot of CVs. How do you spot that? Okay, Anita's CV against Michael's CV. You know, which one would you choose? What is it as a consultant? Maybe some pro tips that you can give our audience today.
Yeah. So, let's start with like one of the common platforms for applying for roles or finding out about roles is LinkedIn, right? So one thing we've noticed is, let's say we put up an ad to say we're looking for this, we're looking for an HR manager, and this is the background that we're required. We'll get a lot of comments, and a lot of comments will say, interesting opportunity, or interested, please look at my profile. So what, again, going back to the be proactive, look for the opportunity, look, like, message us, send us an email, follow the post, like, do as we've asked. So if we say, send us your CV to this email address, do that. Don't expect the recruiter to go and then look for your profile. So that's something that, straight off the bat, they can do quite easily. Just follow the instruction. Then number two is, when you send that email, have a cover letter, which is, I mean, traditionally it was called a cover letter. Right now it's by email. Again, talk about why you are the right fit for the role. So for instance, if the position requires experience in X industry, do you have that experience? Highlight that in the email. Is there any area of specialization that the role requires? Highlight that in your email. The next thing is, even something as simple as the subject of the email. Don't put my CV, because we get hundreds of or recruiters get hundreds of emails. So my CV is not going to earn you. No one's going to know who my is. Put your name. Think about what that subject line is. Number three, the CV itself. Make sure your CV, you have read it. It has been spell checked. It has your contact information that's visible. So if we want to get in touch with you, if any recruiter wants to get in touch with you, it's easy. They have your contact information. And this may sound like, of course, people are going to put their contact information. We get lots of CVs with either no information or incorrect information, unfortunately. So even if we do want to get in touch with them, we're unable to. So, share your CV with your friends and family. Ask them to have a look, and then give you feedback to say, does it actually ring through in terms of, does it say what you've done in your previous role? So if you can do these three things well, assuming you do meet the requirements for the role, that's a really good start.
Yeah. You have to remember, and I think that, change the way you approach an application. It's not being selected, it's avoiding elimination. That's how you should see it. What can I do? What I can possibly do, everything that I can do to be not eliminated. So these sort of, hygiene things, spellings, make your subject headline searchable, name your CV properly, your name, the job opportunity, the company, whatever, like a reasonable CV. So it's easy to search in folders and files when it reaches a database. Like she said, subject line is my CV. CV name is also my CV. That's not, that doesn't differentiate. So
It could get lost in the entire process, I guess.
Probably. It's like you save the recruiter the time to rename your file and all of that stuff, right? Because the simplify, that's just courtesy that you offer the recruiter without that person even realizing, and that differentiates yourself. So that's change the mindset from not being worrying about selection and more about avoiding elimination.
Correct. Exactly. And so the next step is actually getting contacted by a recruiter, right? So when you get contacted by a recruiter, candidates need to remember that your recruiter is partner with your recruiter to get the job. Not, don't think that a recruiter is a hurdle to getting the job. The recruiter has as much vested interest in you getting the job as you want to. So they are there to support you. So when they have that initial conversation, be honest and be transparent. If the recruiter shares a budget, for example, for the role, if that is not something that works for you, be transparent around it. we have, there's a lot of times that candidates will say, yeah, I'm absolutely fine. But then when they actually meet the hiring manager, everything changes. And it doesn't make the recruiter look good. And it doesn't, you lose your own credibility because you have agreed to something
Yeah.
previously. So be honest and transparent from the beginning. If there's something that you're weak on in terms of the requirements, again, be honest and transparent. Hiring managers are very often, they're quite understanding to say, right, if you meet 80% of my job description, but you need help on 20%, they'll accommodate that. But they want to know this upfront. So that's something that, work with your recruiter is what we would say. I'd also want to add, like nowadays, because of the situation, a lot of these initial interviews happen on Zoom or Microsoft Teams and things like that. So prep for that as well. How do you prep for that? Something simple as when you test your technology, make sure that you have a clear background or you don't have your laundry, hanging in your background.
True.
Make sure that there's enough lighting. Maybe test it. Try doing a Zoom call or a call with a friend just to see, like, can you hear me right? Do I look all right? Dress the part, even if it's on Zoom. So just making your impression matters, even if it's across a screen.
Yeah.
Make sure that your network is you have strong network. There's nothing more frustrating than trying to speak to a candidate and then you're spending 15 minutes of a 30-minute conversation trying to say, can you hear me? No. Can I hear you? Can you see me? No, I can't see you, right? So it's things like that that you just need to be prepped for every single time that you interact with a recruiter. The next thing is once you speak to the recruiter, a recruiter usually says, right, I'm happy with you as a candidate. I would like to present you to the hiring manager, but they may ask you to prepare a presentation or complete some sort of an exercise or something like this. Do it and respond in a timely fashion. Again, the number of candidates that say yes and then they are MIA for the next couple of days, and then we're desperately trying to reach the candidate. What you're doing, you're self-eliminating and you're not helping yourself.
Yeah.
So it's things like this, going back to the work with your recruiter, because the recruiter wants you to get the job and they will do everything that they can to support you as a candidate, but you have to support yourself.
You actually have your own little PR person, the recruiter, who's trying to represent you in the best way possible. So she or he or whoever this recruiter is will try and represent what you share with her and with that person, right? So you have to make sure that you lean on the recruiter and give your best self to them so they can best represent. Because remember that the conversation you have at the interview with the line manager, a hiring manager, versus the relationship that the recruiter has invested in that hiring manager and that client, if it's an agency, is much longer. So they understand the subtle nuances, so they know how to position you. But if you don't cooperate, if you don't collaborate, if you don't work with them and provide what they ask for, and especially, a lot of recruiters will spend some time with you to prep you for the interview when that time comes. Use that information. That is like gold dust. You shouldn't miss out on that at all. I've seen many times going and they'll tell you to visit the website. Please don't do just the homepage, the front page. Go deep. Look at LinkedIn company profile. Read all the pages of that website. See if that hiring manager has spoken somewhere, sent a blog, some social, connection. See if that person's on the website photograph or whatever. Like, try and get to know this company that you are potentially applying to work with. It's not just an interview, it's you're looking to get the job, right?
Yeah.
So think about it that way, like, what is this company all about? And those sort of things kind of stick with a hiring manager when the interview comes, that you have gone the extra mile. And always go the extra mile and work it backwards, because if you want to spend all this time interviewing, you can't be in sending jobs everywhere. Organize your day and make it like how you would do a full-time job, and start applying that way.
Yeah. And then once you actually attend the interview and you get feedback, call the recruiter back and tell them how it went. So if you had any concerns, they can then address that with the hiring manager, because on the back end, we can tell you what happens is once the candidate leaves, we contact the candidate to see how it went. We also speak with the hiring manager to get some feedback. And it would be so much better to sort of connect the dots to say, if the candidate says, I think I did really well in this area, but I'm not sure if I answered the question, or I think I could have done better. That kind of self-awareness, if you can then relay that back to the hiring manager to say, Bob thought he did a brilliant job with this, but he was a bit concerned with, X, Y, and Z. Then the hiring manager also understands that you've taken the time to kind of reflect on what you've done and what you could have done better. And that presents you in a more positive light. If you get the job, that's brilliant. Again, respond back to an offer and engage with that process proactively. Again, a lot of candidates they will cooperate until that point, and then they will just like sort of fall off the bandwagon. And again, that doesn't kind of represent you in the most positive light. So that's if you get the job. If you don't get the job, be really gracious about it. It's never nice to go back to someone to say, actually, you didn't quite make it. But you might be a great candidate for the next opportunity that comes, that comes up. So be gracious and, thank whoever the person you are interacting with. And then ask about what you could have done differently. Take that feedback on as constructive feedback and work on it. Because you might not hit the first role that you apply for or you go through the process, but you certainly, if you manage yourself through the process, you certainly will create some, a relationship, and you'll be a memorable candidate.
Yeah.
And like going back to the point that recruiters want to place candidates, that's their job. So if you are willing, then they want to put you in front of a hiring manager.
Yeah, but they're the gatekeepers of an organization, right? So the candidate experience that they offer you, you need to give that experience back. So they will suss you out in terms of your behavior, your knowledge, your skills, everything. They're as good as a hiring manager when it comes to who's the right candidate for the company, because they see the company, they see the hiring manager as well. You know, the recruiters become so experienced about the roles they could hire without even having the hiring manager. So don't discount that knowledge that they bring to you in each of these roles that they support and recruit and things. It's not very often that you get to speak to the hiring manager directly, so always understand that this person plays a very crucial role in you getting your next job. So it's not, we're not trying here to like, candidate bashing, but we're trying to keep it real, guys, and we're trying to, be very upfront and honest. Always when you go for interviews, do not wait for the recruiter to call and ask you. Please check in with the recruiter. That goes 100 miles further than anything else. So be a good person that you want to work with, right? So that recruiter could be an in-house recruiter, so it could be a colleague, or could be an external agent that would be a recruiter that you might have to reach out to in a few years. You never know. So relationship building is very important.
Yeah, it's a small world actually, because you would either be working with a recruiter at some point of time, because it's a journey, right? It's not that you get a job and that's the end of it. So I believe that relationship building should be there throughout. You should be in touch. And what do you say about some of the recruiters, some of the candidates complain that recruiters don't revert back with feedback? So why do you think that happens? So like many of them are frustrated that we have attended interviews and there's a lot of time. So what, is there a time lag because of some reasons? Can you throw some light around that? Why do recruiters not respond?
So I can tell you that recruiters, it's not that they don't respond deliberately, right? At any given time, a recruiter is recruiting for multiple positions. So it's definitely not personal. They don't think I'm not going to respond. So there could be a number of reasons that they haven't responded. Like number one, it could actually, you might be the first candidate of maybe 5 candidates, right? And not all 5 candidates get seen in 1 week. Sometimes that happens over a few weeks. So it can take some time until everyone finishes the process before which you can hear. That's that's something that can happen. Sometimes the position just gets put on hold, and the recruiter, they're told actually we'll come back to you next month because there's been a change in the business, and we are delaying the process of hiring. So, would it be ideal for a recruiter to go back to the candidate and say this has happened? Absolutely. Sometimes do they not do that? That happens too. But there's nothing stopping you from calling a recruiter to say, I'm just following up. I interviewed for this position 2 weeks ago. Give the recruiters time. Like, don't attend the interview and then follow up the next day to say, do you have something? I interviewed for this position a couple of weeks ago. Is there any feedback? Yes, no. If there isn't, when do you expect to hear back? And then they can tell you, look, it will take about 3 or 4 weeks. Contact them back in 3 or 4 weeks.
Yes. There's a recruitment cycle that happens behind this. Is interview is just like one point behind a big circle of activities that happen. Maybe they want to see more candidates. Maybe the manager said, look, don't go back just yet. I want to think about it. And so there's activity that happens a lot behind the scenes. The other thing is also, when you get an opportunity at the interview and you're asking questions, always ask if this role is a replacement role or a new job, like a growth related job. Oftentimes, replacement roles have a faster turnaround, and growth jobs have a longer cycle because they have it's associated with many other factors as well. So it's not necessarily just a person. Everything else around it needs to be set up. So this differs as well. If it is, so depends on the nature of the job, depends on the hiring manager's support, because their interviews is not something that anybody plans in the day-to-day work. It's additional work for a hiring manager. So it takes time to give feedback. It takes time to fill up forms. So there's lots of activities and tasks that happen behind the scenes. But most often, I would say any job takes around 8 weeks to 12 weeks before you could say that that position is no longer hot. In fact, my personal experience, I had applied to somebody, a Fortune 500 pharma company, and I got a call a year later. Uh, but
Not
I
that we're saying wait a year,
yeah,
but it
exactly.
takes a long
So,
time.
like the stories never finish. Apply where you think is right and then see what happens when you come back. It's a different matter that we didn't end up working together because we had different plans at a year later. But nevertheless, things take time. It's Dubai. Sometimes you are able to control the timelines, and sometimes you have to give in to the timelines.
Also, like sometimes candidates are upset and understandably so when they don't hear back. But oftentimes they actually don't meet the requirements for the role at all. So just because you've applied for a role that you may not meet the requirements, you're not going to get a reply. So don't expect one. Did you 100% meet every single requirement of the role? If you did, fine. But if you didn't, you should know from the beginning that maybe that's something that you shouldn't have applied for to begin with. And you're not going to hear back because you haven't followed the first instruction, which is read a role job description and
Yeah.
apply for something that you're a fit for.
Yeah, and also like we don't usually decline candidates until the successful candidate is onboarded. This is just something that's when you close a vacancy and you go back to say sorry, the applicant. So that takes time, notices,
Yeah,
mobilizations,
that's a good point.
onboarding, all of that happens behind the scenes. So from a process point of view, any candidates that are in the process don't get the final notice of unsuccessful applicant until the successful applicant has started. So all of that takes time,
So
especially in
how
Dubai with visas
so
and everything.
how yeah, so how do you keep candidates warm while this waiting period is on? Because sometimes some candidates could have more than one offer, two offers happening if they're lucky, I would say, in this scenario, of course. But how do you keep them warm? Like as a recruiter, what is your general things that you do during the stage of waiting?
Yeah. So a couple of things, right? if a candidate has a couple of offers and those offers are actually good offers, we're very transparent with them to say, look, this position, it will take 1, 2, 3 weeks to hear back. So they have to make a decision that works best for them. If they have an offer in hand, that's a good offer. We won't stop them, but we'll be transparent to say, this is how long it would take. Given this information, make a decision that's best for your career. But you can't hold a recruiter hostage to say, well, I've got this, so therefore you have to come back to me. That's a decision that candidates have to make. But I think recruiters, or at least when we've recruited for roles, we go back to candidates to say, this is how much time it would take. And then sometimes they discuss their offers, other offers with us to say, I've got like 2 offers. And then we ask the questions to say, are you just saying yes to this because you want a job? Is this genuinely a company that you have to work with? Not that we give them the answer of whether they should accept it or not, but it just helps kind of talking through and asking the right questions and allowing or helping them to critically evaluate if they really, really want the job. And like you a lot of times good candidates do have multiple offers, and they have multiple offers for a reason, because they are a good candidate and they've actively managed their process by being proactive, by doing all of the right things. So yes, they often have they have multiple offers. So from a recruiter perspective, we always want to do what's in the best interest of the candidate, as well as obviously of the company. But we don't want to stop someone from progressing their own career because of a company. It has to work for both parties. The last thing you want is a candidate sort of declining a role and then waiting for you and then joining the company that you're recruiting for and being unhappy, and then you're responsible. So everyone has to do what's actually best for their own careers.
Yeah.
That's
And
true. That's
the larger the market, in terms of like the bigger the unemployment issue, the more time people will take to find a job. That's just the numbers game, you see. So while we have higher volumes of applications, I can tell you from our side, we still struggle to fill jobs. um,
We do.
Ironically,
It's ironic.
really ironic, because we hear all this conversation about people looking for jobs, and we hear all about these companies that are looking for people. Somehow, one is living in Mars and another one's living in Venus, almost like they don't even work in the same sphere. They're not connecting. And the connection is mostly through recruitment channels. And I think what happens is, I personally went on LinkedIn, and I went and looked for a role. We advertised the role. And when I say advertise, we put a post out. It's not a LinkedIn job advert, right? We put a post out and it should come into people's news feeds. We had very poor response. But when I did a search about people looking for jobs in that role, I had approximately 150 different people that had that logo saying open for work. And I reached out to 150 people. Guess how many came back to me? Not even 10.
wow.
Yeah. So this is
That's
the reality of
shocking.
a recruiter's life. 150 people absolutely put themselves out there saying they're looking for jobs. A recruiter reaches out, and less than 10 apply. And less than 10 apply, and less than 5 get apply based on the process that was asked of them. So you see, you've self eliminated by not taking anything seriously. So I think what happens also is, these portals that you're part of or that you're applying through has a lot of sophisticated algorithms at the back.
Yeah.
And depending on what you're looking for and how you're doing your searches, the information comes into your news feed based on that. So you need to also think about it as how you're going to crack that. So if you randomly apply for all jobs, your news feed is going to be bombarded with all sorts of jobs. But if you're zeroed into the roles that you're looking for, the search might change. We're not experts on what happens in the algorithms, but we can tell you that makes a difference to what you see. So your searches have to be a far more comprehensive and detailed to understand that
Yeah.
you might be a victim of just of an algorithm. So don't fall for that, and be take ownership of what you're seeing, basically. and look for jobs posted, look for jobs that not just are in the job portal but in the news feed as well, and do what's asked of you. It's easy to apply in the job portals. When we did the job advert in the job portal, we got like lots of CVs. So you tell, this is why we're
But
saying.
majority of the CVs didn't match the criteria.
Correct, yeah.
But all of the emails said, having reviewed the requirements for the role, I fit perfectly. No, you. Sorry.
People always feel that they fit into every job, and I guess to a certain extent some roles and some skills are transferable, no
Yeah.
doubt, but you can't be applying just you should actually focus your recruitment strategy or your job search strategy to get the job that you want.
I think you
So
said it
that's very
perfectly.
valid what you said.
It's a strategy that you have to apply for your job hunt. You're absolutely right about that. And what roles, you might be in a like you were people in aviation might be wondering, is there a job for me? Is that industry going to be able to employ
Absolutely.
me? So what, there might be situations where you're in a position or you're in an industry that is evolving or that has less demand, and you would have to shift industries or change careers or transition out. So that takes a little different attitude and different work in terms of understanding what the next opportunity is. But there are people that come out of military who take full-time jobs and go through a transition. So you will have to manage that part yourself as well, as to, when I did this, what parts of my job I liked really well, what training do I need, what upskilling I need to do, what talks I need to attend, where do I need to network. All of that groundwork has to be there before you start applying. Like folks that are in cabin crew, for instance, they've been trained on customer service, they've been trained on safety, they've been trained on so many different aspects of aviation that is easily transferable to another sector. So find those sort of areas that you can pull in and work on that. So that's a different talent pool that needs to reassess where they want. And who knows, maybe your destiny is to be another self entrepreneur. So that's also an option for you to explore. Full-time employment is not maybe your way to go. So I think you should just have a very holistic approach to your next job or
So
next
according
role.
to you, yeah, so according to you, which are the industries which are on rise? Like as you said rightly, the travel industry is sort of not recruiting or is going through a slump right now. So what happens to those candidates? Can they switch over to other industries? And how do they evaluate themselves to do that?
Yeah, so I'm an example of someone who actually switched from aviation to healthcare, two completely different industries. I had no idea. I spent about 8 years in Etihad Airways before I moved to Cleveland Clinic, Abu Dhabi. So I had, so I went through that process. But what I demonstrated, and if I use my own example, is I highlighted what part of my skill could I transfer. I also very honestly admitted that I really didn't know anything about the healthcare industry, and you know offered that when I joined, should I have been successful through the process, I would spend X amount of time. And I had, I mean, this was a long time ago, but I had like spoken to the hiring manager during my interview to say, this is how I plan to go about my first couple of months. So what I demonstrated was I had put a lot of thought, and I was aware that I didn't have the industry experience, but I had really good, strong HR experience that I would bring over, and then I was willing to learn about the industry. So I looked at what worked for me, what my strengths were, and how I could match that to the position.
That's beautiful because I think what candidates lack right now is knowing themselves. They do not know what are they strong. They do not do this SWOT analysis themselves. So they do not know where they can actually fit in. So they would just look at what they're currently doing and try and match into only those roles. But actually, if they look in, they can definitely apply in various industries also. And everything can be learned. It's a skill. You can definitely adapt and
Sure, yeah.
evolve yourself.
Yeah, and like there's so much material available right now, and a lot of it is free or like not very expensive. So invest in your in upskilling yourself. I always say to people, own your own employability. Do not put it in someone else's hands. So think long and hard about what you absolutely need to do to get that next role. And then when you speak to hiring managers, you can always talk about like what you did during this time to upskill yourself and say, look, I realized that I had I was really good with numbers, for instance. So I did a course in data analytics. And it's things like that. When a hiring manager can see like, look, there's the attitude, and this person meets 70 or 80% of the requirements, then they're happy to even invest that time because they know that this person will come on board, and then scoop everything, all the knowledge up, and again own their own employability.
And what do you think are the key things that the employer looks for in a candidate? What are the job roles right now in demand, and what are they looking for? So, as a candidate, what is it that I should dwell up in? What are the three things, if you could say?
So number one, this is not a skill, this is it's attitude, right? Your attitude
Yep.
towards life, towards your job search, towards your current status, whatever it is, but bring your A game, bring a really positive attitude, willingness to learn, willingness to develop. That's what a lot of hiring managers can, straight off the bat, they'd be very open to that. There's a saying that says, hire for attitude, trains you can train skill, right? And so if you can do that, then that's a really really good start to begin with. So have a really really good attitude when you attend an interview.
Yeah. The other thing is when you let your interviews, your showcase, right? You might be having all sorts of issues in your life, or you're 6 months without a job, or you're just 1 month without a job. Your attitude and what body language you bring to the interview, whether it's face to face or Zoom, matters. So you might be down and you might be this, but give the interview an upbeat atmosphere. Like prep yourself, saying, "Look, this is it for me. I'm gonna get this job," and like give yourself that pep talk. So hiring managers can see through that. It's very difficult to lift somebody up in an interview process. So you need to kind of have that attitude and that sort of vibe. The other thing is learn that if you've been given a job description and if you know the company that you're going for, research it in and out. So find the words that you need to bring into your interview. Answer some of the questions in your mind, like what could the managers ask of me? What do you, if it, especially if it is in your own profession, you kind of know, you should know rather, what is the main thing that you could showcase, highlight. Think about numbers, bring some results into the conversation. That's the way you
Yeah.
approach an interview. If somebody says, do you know about your company? Make sure that you have a good answer for that, like a prepped answer saying, yes, I went through your website, I found this interesting, this value makes sense to me, and I was looking for something like this. Or do you know what, but tell me about your experience. Then bring the job description and your experience together in that thing. So prepare your answers.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And if I can just add to that as well, a lot of hiring managers, a lot of companies do what is called competency-based interviews, right? And all that is that they ask you for a past experience where you have experience in a similar situation. So, for instance, a lot of times they'll say, "Tell me about a time when," for instance, if you're applying for a customer service role, "Tell me about a time that you have dealt with a difficult customer." Think about what examples you will give at the interview in advance, and don't think of examples that you have from 10 years ago. Think of a really recent example. And usually you find what the in the job description, it's the companies usually list out what they want. So think of examples and things that you have done previously to say, yes, I have a really good example. And when you think of the example, follow what we call the STAR format. So the situation, what was the task, what was your response, and then what was the outcome. So in that format, if you practice articulating your answer, then it comes through that you have prepared, and you have it becomes it comes across like you've actually thought through the example and thought through how you're articulating the example as well. And no one wants a once upon a time there was, A, B, and C. Just be very sort of succinct with the description that you're giving.
Yeah.
What was the situation? What did you do? What was the outcome? And sometimes they'll say, like maybe that wasn't the ideal way to address it, and say, right, if I have to do it again, this is what I learned from that situation, and this is what I would do
Yeah,
differently.
the reflection of that. So they would ask some probing questions saying, do you think this was the right approach? And say, look, given the information that I had, or had I got an opportunity to do it differently, whatever the answer might be, or say that, considering the circumstances, this was the best we could do, for instance. There is no perfect answer, but there is a prepared answer. This is just what you want, and there's enough material online about how to attend competency based interviews. And I think if you prep for a competency based interview, you could apply that even to a non competency based interview, because that is the kind of information that gives you more than what your CV says. And your CV says you do activities, but it's your experience that you want to talk about.
So our chat is buzzing with a lot of questions, but I do have a couple of my own before I take on someone else, other questions. But there are some questions about psychometric tests, what we can prepare for. But before I get into that, I just wanted to have a question around if we can address about what are the rights of a candidate. What does the candidate need to know while accepting an offer? Some things that they need to keep in mind. It will be nice to know that.
This is a good question.
This is a really good question, and I'm so glad you touched on it. So the number one, two things actually. So number one is, if anyone asks you for money to get you a job, don't do it. Do not pay a recruiter. Do not pay an agency. Do not get. You do not have to pay to get a job. This is, straight off the bat, a really, really big red flag.
Illegal as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's illegal. So that's one thing. Don't pay for a job. The second thing is, if it's too good to be true, then question it. So there's a lot of websites right now that will call you to say, look, I've looked at your application and you look like a good fit for a role that I'm looking for. And all you have to do is to complete the registration of your application, deposit $100 or $200, and then I will be able to, put your candidature forward. And what they will tell you is, this role, it's, so they basically make the role really, really appealing. And of course, as a candidate that you're looking for a job, you can't, it kind of appeals to that side of you. They're like, really, could I really, really get this? And is it just the $100 between me and this role? And you're tempted to pay that money. Don't do it, because, like I said, if it's too good to be true, it's worth questioning. If it is really a genuine job offer, then of course, go for it. But then socialize. Not maybe the number, but the fact that you've got this job offer, and it just sounds too good to be true. I mean, Dubai Jobs Hunt has an excellent Facebook platform that you can say, got an offer, it's from this website, or it's from this recruiter, sounds really amazing. Has anyone had any experience? I guarantee you someone will come back to say, yeah, had the same experience, don't do it. Or actually, no, that sounds genuine, go for it. And then, so then you are protecting yourself.
Yeah. The other thing I would say is, when you're doing your CV and you're giving that responsibility to somebody external, and they tell you that they can give you a keyword search enhanced CV and so on and so forth, test it. Ask them, like, go probing questions, because you're buying a service that is very difficult to kind of assess whether that's going to give you results. And try and always take ownership of your own CV and have somebody review it rather than redo it, because they might put in the wrong words, they might misrepresent you, they might overrepresent you, the language might be different, so many different things. But don't pay for a CV, a recruiter for CV changes as an additional add-on service unless you need it. So don't, somebody would say, oh, if you give me the money, I will redo your CV and then you can apply for the job. That's also another way of, taking money out. And anything that is financial, candidates, The recruiter's bread and butter or their product is the candidate. It's not anything else. So they shouldn't be paying. You shouldn't be paying for that.
Yeah.
That's really good because as you said, just recently, around a couple of days back, it was on one of the Facebook pages wherein someone had said, "I've been called for this interview," and when we read through the message, it was written, "Dear candidate," and the first thing that struck me was no recruiter will call a person a candidate if they have selected you for a job, because obviously they have selected you with your CV in mind.
Yeah.
So that itself spots out that, hey, this is a fraud, and please don't go ahead and take up this offer. So there are a lot of things which actually can be highlighted when you put it on a public forum or you share the news with some people that you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
The,
a
the
very valid point.
Sorry, if I could just jump in quite quickly. The other thing that's also a red flag is the email address that you get the offer for. So if someone, like I work for, so let's say SNK Consulting. So our email address is desma@snk.ae. But you hear like desmaconsulting@gmail.com. This is, question it. If somebody is just starting up, maybe they're using Gmail, but question it. So where you're getting that the email address is also kind of is indicative of where how genuine the company is or the recruiter is. In my previous company, we had a lot of agencies, they're not agencies, that would actually produce very authentic looking offers that were so generous. And of course, candidates, their eyes lit up and they had like stamps and seals and approvals and, images of the emblem. And it looked so authentic that anyone could have been easily fooled. And then they'll ask the candidate they'll say, well, you have to pay for your own visa, you have to pay for your own ticket, you have to pay for these things, and then it will be reimbursed when when you join the company.
Yeah. Which
That's a
is,
red flag.
yeah. So you were talking about rights at an offer stage, right? So there are some rights that the UAE labor law has offered to any job, any candidate, anybody. One is if you're applying from overseas to come to Dubai, they should provide you a ticket. The second thing is you are not supposed to be paying for the visa. The visa is supposed to be the employer's responsibility. These are two important things. What is general practice, but not a labor requirement, is some people provide accommodation. Some people do not provide an accommodation, and you have to organize yourself. This is company to company's policy. But by right, you get the visa cost, and the ticket is the company's responsibility. And should something happen, these are not supposed to be recovered from the employee either. And if the employee wants to go back, they have to pay a repatriation ticket as well. These three are given in the labor law as rights. So I hope this answers your question.
So in case a candidate leaves his job on his own, will he still be allowed a repatriation ticket, or it's only if the company asks him to leave? Where does it fall that the return
So
ticket
that's a
part?
very good question. It's actually falling into a what I call a gray area. It's not very hard line saying that the employer has to pay or the employee has to pay. Actually, it's open to interpretation. But if you go and fight the case in the labor, more often than not, the labor is known to side with the employee, but you have to follow the procedure and you have to kind of put in the time that is needed, and that is definitely like any other court and organizations of the government. There is a little bit of bureaucracy and a little bit of process to follow.
But hopefully
But it's
people
good to
get
know.
more
Yeah, it's
jobs.
good to know.
Yeah.
They're getting more jobs than losing jobs.
Yeah, exactly.
So
But yeah, it's usually during the probation period that you have a choice to either stay or not go. But again, a lot of people will hopefully make the right choice, accept the right offer, work with the right organization, and is not looking to leave the next opportunity they get.
yeah.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I will look at if there are any questions from the audience, because I do have some questions, but knowing that we have time constraint, we can't go on. It's also the weekend of Diwali, so I'm sure every one of you want to go home and celebrate. So let me see. There were some questions saying that can we change a job within 6 months of joining an organization? So what would be your take on that?
Can you change a job? Yes, you can change.
Anytime.
You can change a job.
Is there any issues related to changing jobs that quickly?
So, you know, the issue is the why of why you're changing the job, right? So, is it because you just kind of signed up to the first thing that came your way, and now you've got something better, different, and then you've like switched jobs? Recognize that the employer spends a lot of money to in terms of your visa costs and things like that. So if you are not convinced that something is the right job, don't take it. Don't join a company and then just kind of jump. If there are genuine concerns, then of course leave, and move on to something that's better. So can you leave within the first 6 months? Yes, you can, but leave for the right reasons.
Yeah. From a
Would there
labor
be a ban? Would there be a ban or anything involved in these cases?
So again, this answer is a little more nuanced because it depends on the contract you have. If you have a limited contract, an unlimited contract, if your probation period is 6 months or is it 3 months, so it's not a very straightforward answer to give. That is there a problem? The why and the contractual things that you have signed up to will determine that. So, you can leave anytime. It's a free market in that way, but you are constrained to what you have signed. So your contractual obligations and the labor law that holds you accountable for certain things that you signed will obviously be applied.
I had known that you have on your blog, you have mentioned specifically something on video or Zoom interviews. So would you like to just give a few tips on that for our candidates, for the people out here?
Yeah,
Like,
Sure.
and maybe share your link of
yeah, I think
your
that would
blog also.
probably be better. And like I
Yeah.
touched upon it
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, I
very
think I will put in your link out here so people can actually go to your website and check those blogs and that information, because there's so much of information on your website. I'm sure it's going to be very helpful for our audience out here, especially those who are going to be watching us later on YouTube too. So
yeah.
it will be
Please
really
do.
helpful.
Yeah,
Please
and
follow us also on Insta and on our LinkedIn, because we share a lot of tips and tricks and things that you have to be aware of, or things that you can do, should do to be a good, to make yourself to stand out as a candidate, but also to be a good manager. For instance, we call it Thank You Thursday. So every Thursday we remind people to say thank you to someone, to recognize, to acknowledge, to appreciate. So yes, please do follow us on our social media.
There is a question from Vasudev Rao. He says that I'm in a senior position with many years of experience and I'm willing to take on a bit of a junior role, but how do I convince them to take and consider me? So, can you help him with that?
Um, sure. So I think what I would need to understand is the why again. Like, why are you willing to move from a senior position to a junior position? What is the motivation behind it? And that will, that's what you need to you need to probably articulate to the person that's hiring. And if it's a genuine, like, times are tough, I want to continue to stay employed, and or I want to explore a different industry, or I want to explore a different field. There's a lot of reasons that would be the motivation for you to go from a senior role to a junior role. So you need to articulate that a little more to be able to understand why. Also, you also have to realize, someone with a lot of experience, when they move, or even if they're willing to move to a junior role, um, they will have someone managing them that may have less experience than they've previously had, right? So that can lead to a lot of sort of workplace conflict or a clash of views, because obviously you're a senior professional, you have a lot of years of experience.
Yeah.
So companies are, they're wary of that. Plus, the other thing is, companies value people's experience. So it also feels a bit unfair to take a senior professional and place them in a junior role, because that's not utilizing their full skill set. Even if that person is willing, as an organization, it would be personally, it would be quite hard for some, to take someone really senior and put them in a junior role. It would feel like a bit of a disservice. So the motivation of why you're willing to go from a senior to a junior role is probably what
Yeah.
would help you convince them.
And also the circumstances. Is it circumstantial that you're taking a junior role, or are you taking one because you're changing industries? For instance, you're coming out of aviation and going into FMCG, for it, as an example. So then you know that there is a change, and you're willing to like start somewhere further down and then rise above. That could be it. But also the compensation then changes, so they will also understand that you had a standard of life and a compensation. How are you going to adjust? So you need to articulate how you've thought that through. So I recognize that the compensation is different, I've made some adjustments, whatever. That's how you try and convince them to say, look, I have aligned myself from a career and a compensation wise to a junior role, and I would like to be given the opportunity, and see if that works.
Yeah, I think it could also be because of the times right now. Many of the people in senior positions are losing their job, and they want something to sustain themselves. So that also could be one of the reasons. But yes, you need to be able to convince them by trying to tell them why is your reason of change. So that will be more something which they can use, I
Yeah.
guess. If your why is strong. Is there any some psychometric tests or something which people can do to evaluate themselves, their skills? Would you
Oh
be
yeah.
able to share something on that?
There are quite a lot of
Yeah.
different tests. There is not just one, but ones that come to mind are like Gallup and MBTI, but
DISC is another
DISC is
one.
another one. We're
And a
not
lot of them are free.
correct.
So you can, you'll get results shared
Yeah.
directly to you, and it gives you a bit of explanation on on why the result was the
Yeah.
result.
But also, please, why are you doing the test? What are you going to do with the results of the test? Are you trying to apply it to improve on it? A test is an assessment based on your responses. It's the outcome of what you do with that test that matters. So I don't know if it will help you get a job by saying you've done these assessments, but if you use those assessments to change the way you approach your job hunt, then maybe. But tests, or for what basis, for what reason are you doing the test? Then you find a test that works for that. Is it a skill-based test? Is it a behavioral test? Is it a personality test? What sort of a test are you looking for?
Yeah, so I think that's it's very important to know. But like the person has mentioned about strengths and weakness, but yes, strengths and weakness in what area are you looking for, and then the test would have to apply accordingly, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I don't think anyone has a weakness. I think it's always areas of development or just self awareness to say, look, I don't enjoy this. Like, I can tell you, personally, I'm not fond of anything math. My mother would hate me saying this, but, anything math related, I know straight off the bat that it's not my strength. But I'm self aware, right? But going back to the assessment, DISC assessment is something that's quite popular, and it's free.
Is it DISK? I'll just mention it on the
DISC.
chat. DI?
DISC.
DIS.
Delta, India, sugar, China. That's how it is.
Charlie.
Charlie.
Yeah, I think Avel has shared that. Try this assessment on Tony Robbins. So thank you, Avel, for that. It was really helpful. So I would just take the last question because we're already at 8:15. I wouldn't want to take much of your time. Thank you so much. You have been really, really wonderful to answer all my questions as well as the audience. Just one last question, which I would like to say is. Like some of the companies while doing the recruitment process, they ask candidates to prepare some projects or presentations, and I had a couple of my friends who spend hours and hours of doing that, and then when the interview time is there, they just give them around 5 or 10 minutes to present it. And the question to them is, are they trying to steal my ideas? Why can't they give me the time when I have spent the weekend preparing for it? So what is your take on that? Should they give in more ideas, or should they just describe the outline? How do you think they should work around that in the interview stage?
I think they should, if it's a task, they should answer the question. If you're going to worry about someone stealing your ideas, um, I don't think that is something that you should worry about, because ideas are plenty. Lots of people have lots of ideas. It's the implementation or the you taking it forward that makes the difference. So you can give somebody an amazing idea, but they're not going to be able to implement it as you are. But how you present yourself reflects why you should be that person in the organization implementing this amazing idea, that you are sharing.
Yeah.
We're also startup founders, which is a company completely separate to SNK Consulting. And one of the things we learned very early on when we sort of came up with our idea and we would talk about it in code because we thought someone's may steal our idea. The truth is, right, again, ideas are plenty. It's the implementation of it that actually matters. So yeah, yes, they can, but the alternative is not presenting the best version of yourself.
Yeah. The other thing I was just, adding to the startup thing, what is wrong with 5 minutes of presentation time? An elevator pitch for a startup who gets funding gets 5 minutes to present. So you have to prep, you have to prepare to make sure that you can deliver what you want to deliver in 5 minutes.
That's where the prep comes
That's
into
where the
play.
prep comes in. Not just present, not just putting slides together. It's prepping the content and the material of those slides. So you ask for what the time slot is and you prep to fit into that time slot.
Okay.
And that, my friends, 5 minutes doesn't equal to 5 minutes of presentation work. It equals to hours of presentation work to be able to get to a 5 minute crisp presentation. And you're one candidate, they might be interviewing many. So you need to make sure that you make that 5 minutes count for you.
Yeah, I remember, again, just kind of relaying my own personal example is when we were pitching our company, our startup, we pitched it to In5 Tech, which is a local tech incubator. The pitch was 5 minutes and it was timed. And in this pitch, we had to convey the idea, the target audience, the revenue projections, the marketing plan, the customer acquisition process, the competitors, the customer journey, the
value proposition.
value proposition, the challenges, the team. And we had 5 minutes, and I was the one presenting. And she was the one listening to me practice every single day because because we just had to rehearse that much. So we put in not hours, we put in months of work before I made that 5 minute pitch. So to think that 5 minutes determines whether we got accepted into this incubator goes back to the same thing to say we've put in all of this work, right? But that's the challenge. And so literally you could wake me up in the middle of the night and ask me to say my pitch and I would rattle it off because that's how much I had practiced.
Yeah.
And that is the level of commitment that you need if you really want to go after something.
Yeah. And just not the pitch, but it was also the Q&A that followed the pitch. We practiced that as well. We were devil's advocate and every other advocate that you could think of to say, okay, so what about this? If they push this question, how would you answer this? So we probed our own assessment.
Yeah.
We did mock interviews. We timed ourselves. We did all of that just to prep while, trying to run another business, while attending to our clients, all of that stuff.
Yeah. So preparation is key, I guess,
Exactly.
is the bottom line. Stand in front of a mirror and speak to yourself. Speak to your family, speak to anybody that will hear you. Because when you start saying it aloud, you start kind of, realizing that you're not getting the right words or you're fumbling, you're saying too much, you're not able to express yourself. And then so when you listen to yourself, at least you can go back to say, well, how could I have said it differently and, better?
Yeah.
And as you said, we just have around 7 to 10 seconds to make the first impression. And if you're not prepared, that's where we just blow our chances off, So it's true. And as Avil has mentioned, so we wish our candidates also would prepare the elevator pitches like that.
Yeah. The only
practice.
If your presentation has to do with your current company strategy or your competitors, that information, that is your integrity and your ethics, that's not something that
you should share.
So if they're asking you to present something that your approach, your execution strategy, your this, that's fine. But don't share things that are from your current employer, your past employer, your
That's intellectual property of
property,
someone else.
yeah, or revenue numbers or any of that. That's not the way you get your next job, is by telling something else. That just shows your attitude and your behavior and your personality. So don't do that. And if somebody asks to do that, question whether is that the company you want to work with.
Thank you so much. That was really insightful, and I'm sure our audience would be really appreciative of that, because many of them think, that they be selfish about sharing, but actually there's a value behind it, and they should not forget that.
Yeah.
And the last bit I seen on your website, there is something called as HR on demand. So I'm very curious, as a recruiter myself, as an HR professional, what do you mean by HR on demand? If you could give,
Well, thank you
just
for
close it
asking.
with that. Close it with that. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are HR professionals who could use some information like that. So please
Yeah.
share with us.
So HR on demand is a concept that we came about because we recognize that there are businesses that we want to offer sound best practice HR to, but they're not big enough or they don't have the volumes to justify hiring full-time in-house HR. So what we do is we provide a service where we act as an extension of your team. So we, in essence, are your HR department. So for all practical purpose, we are the HR team. And so we are basic. Our services are available on demand. That can vary from. So we have clients that have maybe 10 hours a month to 30 hours a month. Some months maybe more than the other. But the flexibility of, it's almost like a pay as you go package. Maybe you don't need to have a full time postpaid plan, but you have the ability to sort of add credit and make calls only when you need calls. That's kind of the analogy of the easiest way to think
Yeah,
about
it's
it.
very much bite sized. So we charge by the hour, and whatever work we do, we count to the minute. So it makes commercial sense for companies that are looking to get that extra help without having to commit to a huge, packages and fees and things.
And this is across the spectrum of all HR services. So whether you want help with recruitment, or whether you want help with onboarding someone, or whether you want help with offboarding someone, or you want guidance on an employee relations case, or you need to create something that's to measure performance, we can come in and we can just kind of do these little chunks of pieces, and you don't have to we won't put you we won't put a client on a 1 year contract that you have to keep paying us every month, because we're a business. We understand what or we look at offering something that commercially makes sense
Yeah.
to other businesses. And our vision at SNK Consulting is really to change the landscape of HR across the GCC, one business at a time. So we're constantly thinking of innovative ways to do this. And we actually have something in the works that we are going to launch in the
Yeah.
beginning of 2020.
I think our vision is basically, to bring good HR to every company,
Yeah.
to put it simply. And we cannot be everywhere. We're just two people. We try, we really do. But we can't be everywhere. So we're going to try and find ways to make that happen.
Yeah.
And, stay in touch, watch our social channels, and hopefully you will find something that is of interest to you.
Yeah, and we right now we're supported by an amazing team of 10 consultants
Who-
that are
Yeah.
who are working on like a variety of projects as well. And I can tell you, none of them came in as consultants, as in like their previous experience was in the corporate world, but they were open to the opportunity. We asked applicants to send us a 2-minute video of introducing themselves and presenting to us their unique HR perspective. So they went the extra mile. They did it, and we were able to find opportunities, paying opportunities for 10 people in a market where people are losing jobs left, right,
Yeah, and
center.
they're all freelance workers that have, subscribed to this model, the business model, and now are actually, finding themselves gainfully employed in some ways, but having a better balance between work and life. And this is how we're using HR on demand by that extension, and giving,
Yeah.
opportunities across to the 10 consultants at the moment.
So that was really beautiful. As one of the participants has put, creativity and innovation is the key to success, and that's what exactly y'all are doing. So thank you so much, Elrona and Desma. Thank you so much for your time. I know it's
Thank you
close
so
to
much.
8:25, so I don't want to take any more time. I have hundreds of questions, and as I will said, we need an entire day session with you all because you'll have so much of things to offer. So I will hand over now to Michael to close this, and of course we can get off the